You are listening to the Mom to Mom podcast, hosted by Stephanie Sinclair, founder and owner of How to Mom. This podcast is meant to empower women and bring the community together through storytelling and education. During these episodes, you will hear stories of triumph, heartache, and hope. You will hear time-tested tips and tricks shared by mamas and women. You will hear a variety of birth stories that will resonate with all birthing families, advice from professionals who have dedicated their teachings to pregnancy, birth, and moms. Here, you will find encouragement, support, and community, because we are your community, and we are so happy to have you. Now, on to today's episode. Hello, you guys. I am so excited to have all of you listeners here with us today to hear yet another beautiful, raw, real birth story. Actually, two birth stories in one podcast. So you're even luckier to be here today. I am so excited to introduce our next guest. She started as a How to Mom client, has turned friend, and I would even go out on a limb and say family. I have had such a joy getting to work with this client and friend and getting to know her and her family. And honestly, I feel like I can say we've learned so much even together, not only as moms, but also as her birth doula. And so I am going to turn it over to beautiful, beautiful mama of two boys, Brigette. Thank you so much for being here today and just for your willingness to share your real, raw stories with our community, because this is what makes a difference. And this is what helps moms who come after us to hear these stories. So thank you so much for being here, Brigette.
Yes, I am so excited. I am so excited for this. I think that all birth stories are so wonderful, and I love to hear all the details of them. And I love to share mine over and over and over again to anyone who wants to hear it.
I love it. You are not alone. I could listen to birth stories all day long. So I'm just so happy to have you here. If you want to let our listeners know a little bit more about you, and then I think we can just dive right into kind of the work we started with when you were a brand new pregnant mama, and then kind of through the birth stories of both of your boys.
Wonderful. Yeah. Well, I feel like that's just such a loaded kind of question of like, tell us a little bit about you. And I honestly think that as a newer mom of a 2-year-old and a 7-month-old, I'm figuring that out actually, and probably relatable to many. But I just am figuring out this journey called motherhood. And yep, we have 2 young boys, like I said, just turned 2, and then the other is 7 months old. So they keep us very busy, and it is so entertaining and so fun all the time. I am also a teacher. So there's that aspect of working motherhood that comes in. But I just feel like I'm figuring out what motherhood looks like for me. And that's kind of the stage of life that I'm in right now. And it's a journey. And I think it took about 2 years. And now I feel like we're in it and I'm feeling good about it.
Yeah,
So
I
for anyone
know.
who's in the early stages, just know I
It
feel
takes
like at that 2-year
time.
mark, you kind of get there of like, all right, I can do this.
Absolutely. And I think that's really something that caught me off guard as a new mom as well, is just kind of how long it took me to feel like I was comfortable in this new role and had some confidence and experience to kind of lean into. But I just think sometimes our society doesn't talk much about how long that process really can take. And obviously with your experiences, I mean, you were welcoming another babe during that really growing time frame as becoming a mom. So I think you can speak to a lot of our listeners, who are having babies closer together, because that in itself is a huge learning journey as well.
Oh, yeah. And so beautiful too.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
beautiful.
and you guys, we will link everything and of course talk about this at the end, but a lot of Bridget's posts on social media are extremely inspiring in the sense of she shares, this journey into motherhood, but what works for her and really leaning into nature and what's already around us and a lot less about things and more about experiences and what we can show our kids through getting outside and adventures. And so I could go on and on about that, but the posts that you put up are, I love that we can inspire each other. Like, I
Oh,
have this little niche and you have a niche, and if we can all just be vulnerable and share that and have that trusting community, we just can learn from one another so much. So
yeah.
if you're not following her, I'm going to link her social below so that you can be following her and get inspired like I do. Um, but I want you to maybe start kind of talking through what that first pregnancy was like for you and what made you, how did you start thinking about birth and what you wanted and desired for this experience, and why was part of that step looking for a birth doula and having somebody there to support you during that process? Because I have been absolutely honored to support Bridget through both of her births, and I never forget any of these births that I attend. But what was very special about her last is that her son and I share a birthday, and
Yeah, I forgot that.
there is nothing better than starting your birthday by witnessing birth and knowing that him and I will always have that connection. It was just
Yes.
like the best birthday present I could have ever asked for.
Yeah. So sweet. Okay, so to start, I guess the reason that I wanted a doula was because I've always kind of done things pretty naturally in terms of, how we are in our home
Mhm.
and understanding completely all of the benefits of medicine and all of that.
Yes.
Um, and I also have a background in kinesiology, which is about the human body and all of that. I find it so fascinating. And so when we got pregnant, I knew right away that I wanted to do things as naturally. I wanted to do things vaginally. I wanted to do things unmedicated. And I just started reading about it first, actually. I have a friend who, well, a social media friend, I guess you could call it,
Yeah.
who was pregnant around the same time as I was with her first. And she was doing like hypnobirthing and had a couple books that she had recommended. So I got a couple of those and just started reading about it. And the more I read about birth, the more I wanted to do it the way I wanted to do it.
Yes.
And, but then it was like, how?
Hmm.
How can I do this the way I want to do it with the support that I know I need by reading all of the books that talk through all of the things that can happen during labor and also all of the things that your body can just do for you?
Hmm.
How do I get supported through that? And
Yeah.
that's when another friend of mine was working with you.
Mhm.
And I was like, okay, well, I need to do this. I need someone who can be there for me because I had read about many warnings that having a hospital birth, which I wanted to do, that's
Mhm.
where I knew I would feel safest,
Mhm.
also comes with maybe some pressure and some of the norms of a hospital birth that I didn't want to be part of my birth.
Right.
And I think that's kind of when I reached out to you. And I think at that point I might have been like 4 or 5 months pregnant,
Hmm.
maybe
Yep.
even six.
Yep.
I
I
don't
think
know.
probably between 5 and 6, if I remember right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then after talking to you, it was like, all right, this is what we're doing.
Yeah.
It just felt, and again, the more I learned, the more I talked to you, the more I knew that my body could do it.
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
also knew that in the moment, I was going to doubt that,
Absolutely. Hmm.
which is a huge benefit of having a doula because that outside perspective that's not internal in your brain can really advocate for you. And you did. And that's truly, especially with my first there's no way I would have been able to do that unmedicated had you not been there.
Mm.
I like 100%. I will say that over and over again. I know there was a specific moment
Mhm.
where I was
Mhm.
done.
We don't. Absolutely. It's a part of the physiological part of birth. It's our hormones contribute to that doubt, maybe a little bit of fear, that anxiety. And we talk a lot too about you can have the most supportive spouse or partner in the room. Um, and they can do incredible things. But what is different about a birth doula is we've seen birth many and many and many and many of times. So not only are we able to reassure that the process is the process, but also a lot of times partners want to fix, right? If something is wrong or if our partner is hurting or in pain or suffering, of course we want to take that away. We don't want that to be the case for the person that we love. But when we have an educator in the room to say, this is a part of childbirth, like we have to go through these stages to get to the other side, to get baby in our arms. And you always knew that from all the work that we did, and you knew that. But when you're in that very vulnerable state and that temptation of, I just want this to be done, that's a lot of pressure, right? And so just having those
Yes.
people that you trust, your team next to you to remind you of your why and to distract or to remind, like there's just so many tools, even just with our voice, that we can use in those moments of doubt that we all face
Yeah.
during our
Oh
birth.
yeah.
Hmm. Yes.
Yeah. I will never forget it.
Never. I will never forget it. So many moments from your birth I will never forget.
Yeah.
Um, so we started the work right away. And just like we do with all of our clients, we not only educate, we provide that physical support, not only to the mom who's carrying babe, but also creating space for baby to get into an optimal position, with the goal of minimizing the intensity of labor and to
Mhm.
shorten it, right? To make every contraction as effective as possible. And Brigette was so open to all of the positions, knowing that movement was key, balance was important. So providing that emotional, that physical support. And then, yes, of course, letting Brigette and her husband know about the advocacy piece, right? With no, and you said it just perfectly when you opened up of knowing that you wanted to be in a hospital because that is where you felt safest.
Mhm.
And I tell clients that all the time who say, I don't know, just because of those pressures at the hospital, maybe I should be at a birth center, but my intuition is not really in line with that. And I always say, you have to feel safe. You have to feel safe where you're birthing. And I think that was key for you. But then we work through the scenarios and the pressure and the whys behind you birthing the way you desired to birth, which is just beautiful the way that you said that. So, yes, okay, continue, take it away.
I guess, do we want to talk more about prior to birth or do we want to like get into it?
I think let's get into it because
Okay.
and I think too this beginning is going to be so important for people to hear too because you did a lot of work at home.
Yes, we
Mhm,
did.
mhm, mhm.
And it's funny because I was running through this the past couple days, just thinking through it all. And you get to a space where you remember every single detail. And then you get to another space where I'm like, there was 4 hours where I didn't know what was happening.
I know.
So I'll do my best. And then
Yes,
if I miss something, feel free to jump on in.
perfect. Will do. I love it.
Okay. So let's think about this. So Cyrus is my first. He was born November 4th, 2020, which 2020 we all
Mm,
know was quite the intense year.
mhm.
And I guess his story started on a Monday. It was election day of 2020.
Yes, it was. Yes, it was.
And if, you guys can think back to all of that, but I
Yeah.
was actually so happy that this was all happening then because I had no clue what the outcome of the election was going to be. So
Amen.
in hindsight, it was such a blessing.
Even for your support team, I was
Yeah.
like, I would much rather be here in this space than paying attention to any of that. It was the most beautiful distraction and hope that we all needed in that moment.
Yeah. So Monday, so it was a Monday, and I remember going to work and just I text my husband, I was like, something just a little bit different today. A little more
Mhm,
cramping, little just a little different.
mhm,
And after work, went and voted, came
mhm,
home. I think it was about 5 o'clock. I was making dinner and again, just feeling a bit uncomfortable. And then when dinner was ready, I couldn't sit down to eat. I
mhm,
felt like sitting was really uncomfortable. Again, I'm just going to be completely open. I had to use the bathroom a lot
mhm.
because as baby was moving down, he was pushing everything out.
Making
So,
room.
really, I think that was one of my first signs of actual labor
Absolutely.
was that. And I just felt really uncomfortable. I kept wanting to get up and move. I couldn't really sit. And then the evening went on. I think I texted you around 7
Mhm,
and said, I think I might be in labor. I'm not
mhm.
really sure with your first one. Now having two, the first one, you really don't know. So,
And what was Cyrus's original due date or estimated date?
ooh,
I know, I was trying to
November
think of
8th,
that. Okay.
because he came
Yep,
4 days early. He came
that's
4
right.
days. And so I text you around 7 and I said, I think I'm having these contractions, not really sure. You're like, just try to eat and drink as much water as possible. Because if it is real, you're going to need that.
Mhm,
Okay. Tried my best to eat. And then contractions were getting closer. And I started tracking it at that point on my phone on an app
mhm,
and just kind of kept tracking it. I think my husband went to bed around 9:30. I was out on the couch, tried to rest, was uncomfortable, took a bath around 11,
mhm,
helped a little bit. And again, I think I called you around 1
mhm.
because it was I was really focusing on breathing and I needed to know at that point if I should put in for a sub at work
Yes, yes, yes.
because I was like if this is false labor, I don't want to take an extra day off
Right.
and but at 1 o'clock it was like I'm not going to get up and go to work in a few hours anyways. So,
Have not been sleeping. Yeah.
yeah. And I remember you listening to a few of my contractions
Mhm,
and we came up with a plan and the plan was try to rest
mhm,
and you said call me back in an hour, I think.
mhm.
And I ended up falling asleep for I think 2 hours,
Yes.
maybe
Mm,
3. And then around 4 a.m. I woke up and I think I said to my husband like I got him up I'm like I think we need to go now.
yep.
It's getting intense and I called
Mm,
you. You're like, "All right, well, I'm going to get ready. I'll meet you at the hospital."
mhm,
So we made our way.
mhm.
I'll never forget sitting in the car waiting for my husband, going, what is taking so long? And it really wasn't that long, but
He was
even a
probably, like,
couple
shoveling
contractions
or
feels
blowing
like
or
he was making himself tea.
I love it.
I love him. He's great. Okay.
Yes.
I just remember the smell of the tea when he got in the car.
Yes.
And I was like, I didn't say anything, but I was like, that's what took you so long.
Seriously. And a minute feels like a very long time in those
Hmm.
moments. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So we drive to the hospital. Um, I get out, he goes and parks the car. And I think I got up to labor and delivery
Mhm,
and had a pretty intense contraction
mhm,
and was on all fours, like
mhm,
crawling to the check-in.
mhm.
And then the lady's like, "Can I help you?" I'm like, yeah.
I bet you can
Yes,
guess why I'm
please."
here.
Yeah. So get checked in. I think they checked me, I was at like a 4.5,
Mhm.
I think.
I think I walked in, I think literally right when they had finished the cervical check.
Okay.
Mhm.
Yeah. And this is all in the triage
Yep.
part,
Yep.
right? Okay.
Okay, you guys, we're going to take just a brief break so I can tell you all about an amazing company, Body Ready Method. Body Ready Method is an amazing company that offers pregnancy and postpartum programs. I urge you to take a look at this, especially if you are wanting to stay active during your pregnancy and prepare for labor and delivery. This is also a great program to help heal and recover your body post-birth. You can go to howtomom.com/links and follow the Body Ready Method link from there. Okay, back to today's episode.
And then,
And what did you feel in that moment when they told you where you were at? You remember?
I remember thinking two things. I was like, that's awesome because a few days ago, I was at a half a centimeter.
Exactly.
So felt like I did a lot of work, but I was also like, oh, there's still a long ways to go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So a little back and forth, but I do remember you telling me that was like, you made it to a 4.5, you did all that work at home. And so I was like, okay, I can be proud of that.
And, 0 to 4 to 6, like there's always a little bit of a range, but we talk a lot too during our prenatals. That is a really challenging time in labor because you are very mentally present, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you can attest to like the difference when you get into that active labor, like mentally something shifts and changes. You're not as aware, right? You're just kind of doing. Whereas, that 0 to 4, 0 to 6, like that's a ton of work. And that takes the most time to do. And you're fully mentally there going, holy buckets, this is intense. And so I just felt like that was such a beautiful place to be with the first baby, laboring all night at home, getting, even if it was a little bit of rest. I know it was just a little bit, but that can do wonders. So yeah, I just remember being so proud and thinking, you are just a badass. This is awesome.
And in hindsight, that is, looking back now, I'm like, good thing I was at that. Good thing I did do that work at home because really I labored at home for almost 12 hours.
Exactly.
And had I gone to the hospital at 7 p.m. the night before, that could have been a completely different story.
1,000%.
So having a doula support to get you through that is so beneficial. So again,
yes,
I love having a doula. Highly, highly recommended.
I love it.
Okay, so then where were we at? I think once we got into the room, I think I got in the bath right away.
Pretty quickly. Yep.
Yeah.
I think we did a little standing, maybe a little bit of ball work, but just basically to get the tub filled, essentially.
Yeah. Yep. So we did that. And in the tub was amazing. I remember the relief of it. And also, I'm pretty sure I would fall asleep a little bit in between each contraction, which I've heard people say that. And I was like, yeah, right. And then it happened to me. And it's like, oh, yeah. You get into this groove, your body gets into this groove, and you can actually relax enough in between to fall asleep.
100%.
So that was a wild experience. And I remember
we had
saying
the lights were completely off. We just had kind of the battery operated candles. Her husband was literally right next to her. And I remember the nurse coming in a couple times to check, but at one point she's like, I'm just going to let you guys be because like, you don't need me and everything is just perfect. And I'm like, that's great. Cause you were just in your groove and you knew we were there.
Yep.
But you were just kind of in your zone doing all that work. And I'm so sorry I interrupted.
No, it's great. I want you to because I miss things. I remember you saying to my husband, actually, something along the lines of her body's doing the work for her right now. And I heard that and I thought through that as well. Like my body is doing the work it needs to do right now. And it was wonderful and just amazing. So I think I was in there. I felt like I was in the bathtub almost the entire time.
Yeah. I mean, it was definitely a good amount of time. You did a lot of work in the bathtub. I'm trying to remember what initiated us getting out of the tub. Well, you getting out of the tub.
I don't even remember.
I'm not sure I do
I don't
either.
remember if,
You were feeling maybe a little pressure? I
I
don't
have
remember.
no idea, or maybe
Yeah.
they wanted to check and see where I was at. I don't know,
Yeah.
but got out of the tub for some reason or
Yep.
another.
Change things up.
And yeah, and I think I got checked again and I was at maybe a 6.
Mhm.
And then I was a little defeated.
Mhm.
And we tried a couple other things. I think we tried the peanut ball
Mhm.
at some point.
Try and get a little
I
bit more
was
rest, but
Yeah, I was not a fan of the peanut ball. Some
yep.
people love that thing. I was just not a fan of it. But I remember feeling a lot of pressure on my tailbone.
Mhm.
And I felt for some reason or another, and I think I might know the reason why now,
Mhm.
I felt like my legs couldn't support me. So we kept wanting to get me into an upright position to put more pressure down to help my cervix open,
Mhm.
but I couldn't, my legs couldn't feel like they could support me. I don't know if I didn't have enough energy
Mhm.
or what,
Mhm.
but it was so painful. My
Mhm.
tailbone was in, it hurt so bad to
Mhm.
be standing upright or even to be on a ball. I think the reason now looking back at pictures was because of the way Cyrus came out. He had that one hand up,
Hand
and
up.
I almost
Mhm.
wonder if his like elbow and his arm were pressing on there.
Yeah.
Cause yeah, because I look back and that's the way he came out was that arm down.
Yeah.
So maybe that was why. I don't
And
know,
I
but there
think
was so
too,
much pressure.
there might have been things might have moved a little bit quicker if that was not his position. I think he just really had to work hard to navigate
Mhm,
and to maneuver. And unfortunately, but fortunately, like we have to be so patient with that, right? Because it's not just you working, your baby is also working during that
mhm,
process. And yeah, I just remember you looking at me and with that a little bit defeated look of,
mhm,
I thought we would be kind of further. And right, like nobody has a magic 8 ball in births. Not your midwife, not your doctor, not your nurses, not your birth doula. And even in those moments where I might not know the answer, right? Of like, yeah, I definitely with all that work that you did and how intense these contractions are, thinking that, yeah, I kind of thought things would be further along as well. But just digging deep and looking your client in the eyes and telling them they are doing such a great job and
mhm,
that we will get on the other side. We just need tools. We just
mhm.
need comfort measures. And again, sometimes those suggestions don't work, right? Like, hey, let's get in this position. If it's uncomfortable for a mom, or like you said, I mean, I remember that feeling too of like my legs just felt really tired, really heavy. Like, I just felt like, how do some women get into such great positions? I just didn't have, I wasn't able to do that as well at one of my births. And we just have to keep trying, right?
Yeah,
Yeah. And we just have to keep empowering. And I think that was at the time that I pulled out affirmation cards.
yeah, yep. I remember you setting those out and I think repeating them to me.
Mhm,
Again, this is where some things just kind of turn into a blur.
mhm,
Um, and I don't remember at what point, again, where I know I got back in the bath at
mhm.
some point.
Because you were coping so much better in the bath. And I guess to speak to of like there's no magic 8 ball. I do remember this moment where you looked at me and it might have been a little bit further down the road, but you said, I want to be done. And
Mhm.
instead of me saying, okay, here's what we can do, or let's intervene, or let's speed up the process, I just remember looking at you and going, I know.
Yep,
I want you to be able to be done too. And
yep.
that's what I think can be so great about birth is we don't need to fix it.
No.
We can just sit in that like, I know. I want this to be
Mhm,
done for you too. And I just
mhm,
like my heart was just like feeling for you because you were working so hard and I'm like, I know I want this to be over for you too, but we're just going to
mhm.
keep working. We're going to keep doing this. And I want you to tell people because when we sat down to start the work for your second birth, I loved it. You were like, because I was repeating those positive affirmations, and you gave me the feedback. You were like, I knew I needed that, but like I kind of wanted to tell you to stop. And do
Yeah.
you remember what I'm talking about? And I love that honesty. Like, and I tell our clients that, like, this has to be a very intimate relationship. You have to
Mhm.
feel so just I don't know if you want to tell the listeners because I
Yeah.
just loved that feedback.
And it was so, again, everything kind of gets in a blur, but, and I don't remember if it was that or I don't remember what detail it was, but, and you had told me like people birth in different ways. So I go very internal.
Mhm.
I just want to be kind of in my own zone. I don't need a lot of people talking to me and
Mhm.
other people, they really enjoy that. And I
Mhm.
just kind of needed to be in my zone. And I don't remember what exactly it was, but it was one of those moments where I was like, I know I needed to hear that at the time, but I didn't want to hear it at the time.
Mhm. Yes.
So it was like, oh, this just internal battle of
Mhm.
what you need and what you
Mhm.
want. And
Mhm.
sometimes we need what we need
Mhm.
too.
And I just think
So
that's an important part to tell because it's not all rainbows and unicorns. There's a lot of
yeah,
hard,
yeah.
and there's a lot of honesty and rawness, and we need to
Mhm.
share all of that.
Yeah. I actually think what I said to you was I knew I needed to hear it, but I kind of wanted to punch you in the face,
Yes.
is what
Yes.
I might have actually said to you.
I'm like, I have to bring this up on the podcast interview because I actually really love that you shared that. Like, we need to share more of those moments. Like,
Yeah.
that is real. That is
Yeah.
real.
Yeah.
And if we don't share the real, the people that come after us don't know what to expect, or they don't know what's normal, or,
Yeah.
that they're not alone. So, okay. So, yes, I think we did get you back into the tub because that was just where you were able to get into a zone. It gave you some relief.
Yeah.
And so we're like, let's just get back in.
Yeah. And so we got back in, and I don't think I was in there that long that time.
No.
And got out. And is that when I labored on the toilet for a little bit? I think
Hmm.
I went directly to the toilet for a little bit,
Hmm.
which felt pretty good because I could sit and I didn't feel that pressure back on my tailbone.
Hmm.
So laboring on the toilet actually felt relatively
Great.
good
Hmm.
as good could be in that moment. And Brent was there, and I would just like hold on to him
Hmm.
as I was laboring. And that, I don't know how, again, the time, I have no idea what happened. And then I think we wanted to check and see where I was at.
Hmm.
And at this point, I believe I was at like a 7 or 8.
Hmm.
And somewhere in here was when the doctor came in.
Hmm.
And again, at some point, I was on all fours laboring, again, feeling so exhausted, looking at you and being like, we didn't know if we were having a boy or girl at the time. And I think I said to you, get it out, just whatever,
Hmm.
whatever needs to happen, just get it out, get it out, get it out, get it out. And I think the doctor came in maybe when I was saying that and got back on the bed. I felt like my legs couldn't support me. I don't know. And at one point, and this is where looking back, things got a little bit, I don't know, it wasn't a perfect birth
Hmm.
by any means.
Hmm.
Um, but I remember the doctor coming in, and this is again why a doula is so important. And I remember her saying, okay, we're going to break your water.
Hmm.
And
Yes.
right away, so grateful for you. You said, I remember hearing you say, that's a medical procedure and we do not have her consent yet,
Hmm.
or something like that.
Hmm.
And again, so grateful that you were there. And not because, and we talked about this later, not because we would have done anything differently,
Hmm.
but
It was the
because,
approach.
yeah, the approach was just like, this is what we're going to do.
Hmm.
And not talking about it, not saying why, nothing like that. It was just like, this is what we're going to do.
Hmm.
And you stepping in and saying, we don't, that's a medical procedure and we don't have her consent right now. And you can talk your side of that too. But
Hmm.
that felt so good to know that somebody was there looking after me when I was so in it
Hmm.
that, and when I said to you, get it out, I knew that if you weren't there looking back, at that point, I know I would have asked for something,
Mhm.
and that could have changed the entire outcome.
Mhm.
So again, so grateful. I can't say that enough.
Well, in this part of your birth story, I mean, there's so many parts that bring me to tears, but that was a tough moment, I think, for everybody, for all of us in that room. Um, because yes, I could tell right away the approach was off, right?
Mhm.
And I knew your wishes. And again, it's not that that would have necessarily changed where you were at with if that was something you desired or not. But I said to the doctor in that moment, I said, "Can you explain the risks to my client if we break her water?" And that really rubbed her wrong. And she got
Mhm.
very upset with me and said, "There are no risks at this point to break her water." And again, right? Like kind of that gut intuition check of it just didn't feel right. And she was thinking very medical, right? Of
Mhm.
like, it's not going to slow things, it's just going to help her progress. And I'm thinking, yes, but I have a client who is wanting a low intervention birth. And in her eyes, it might not be a risk to have you on constant monitoring, but that is what happens after you break waters
Mhm.
is now that client is on constant monitoring for baby. And right, if baby doesn't handle that well, that changes what
Mhm.
happens in your birth. And looking back, I just remember reflecting on that with you during our postpartum visit, and just like it was just a really unfortunate situation because like I said, the nurse was like so amazing and just was like, "You guys are in the zone and you're doing so much, work, and there's just really nothing you need from me. Call me if you need me," essentially is
Yeah.
what she said. And then yeah, it almost felt like this doctor came in and just like was trying to change the whole environment. And I'm thinking, just because you don't consider it a risk doesn't mean clients don't consider constant monitoring and intervention, or what happens if baby doesn't handle that well.
Mhm.
There's no going back, right? And that doesn't mean that it would be a bad choice. Like it's up to you, but
Right.
you deserve to have all the information at your fingertips before
Mhm.
making a decision. And so yeah, that was just it was just unfortunate, right? And as doulas, we try and keep the calm in the room, and we try
Yeah.
to get information for our clients, but do it in a way that doesn't create stress or any
Mhm.
uncomfortableness for our clients, right? Because you need to feel safe. And that is
Yeah.
always going to be something that a birth doula brings. Well, the hope is that a birth doula is always bringing that to the space. So, yeah, I'm glad that you mentioned that because that was a moment.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Mhm,
And after you and I had talked about it, we agreed that yes, that is what we should do right now.
mhm,
And then, but again, the approach came off so, in my opinion, wrong
mhm,
that had she come in and said things like, okay, we can see like you're kind of stuck here at this 7, 8. What we could do is if we could break your water, that might put more pressure
mhm,
on your cervix to help it open up.
mhm.
Okay, I just needed the explanation,
Information.
like
Mhm,
in that, if that had been the approach, that would have just come off differently. And in hindsight, I mean, that's what we did.
mhm,
And I think it did help put more pressure.
100%.
And I think after they broke my water was when I hit transition
Mhm,
or at some point there. And then I can't remember which came first. I think I asked for the nitrous oxide, and I remember throwing up. I don't remember which one
mhm,
happened first.
mhm,
Um, but it was again that transition. I was laying on my left side, using the nitrous through some contractions, but not through others, because that also kind of made me feel a little dizzy,
mhm.
which
And
I
everybody
guess is kind of,
reacts.
yeah,
Mhm,
maybe what it's supposed to do in a way, but it did help me to get out of my own head a little bit
mhm,
and let my body relax in between contractions. So for that birth, it was great. It was very helpful. And I liked that I could put it on when I felt like I needed it, that I was in control of it, but I didn't have to have it on the whole time. And you could just use it for some contractions and not others. I thought that was
Kind
great.
of the perfect tool in that moment. Do you know that
Yeah.
that facility unfortunately no longer offers that as an option? And
Yes.
they point to COVID as the reason, which here's a November 2020 birth,
Yeah.
but that's another podcast topic,
Yeah.
I suppose.
Yeah. Well, they weren't all through my pregnancy. They said that they weren't going to have it. And then at my last appointment, they said, okay, now like that, we have that option now. And I was thinking,
Right.
oh, great. So
Right.
used that. And I remember laying on my left side. And then I don't know who suggested it, but they said, let's flip you over because they checked again. I was at a 9.5, but my right side needed to open up more. So I flipped over to my right. And this is where I forget what it's called, but you get that pushing urge. And it was almost immediate as I rolled.
Went to the other side.
Like, and I think I remember you were standing kind of by the couch and I rolled over and you had warned me that your voice and your birth noise changes when you get that pressure to push. And I think the nurse might have said something and then you said, yep, that sound changed or something like that. I heard your voice saying that, yeah, that sounds like a pushing voice. And it was just like, yep, it's time. Like
the body knew.
Yep. And it was that low, like moaning, pushing sound.
That bear down.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't remember, did they check me again?
I don't think so.
I don't think so. I don't remember that.
I don't think so.
Yeah. So then came pushing time. And this was I should back up a little bit. When we got there at whatever it was, I think we got there around 5:30. I thought we were going to have our baby by noon.
Yeah.
This is now 4:00 in the afternoon. So almost 24 hours of labor. But then again came the urge to push and I started pushing on my side. And this is another point where things got a little bit weird. And I felt good pushing on my side, actually. And then the doctor had said, I remember hearing her say, you look really uncomfortable. Maybe you should flip onto your back. I wasn't uncomfortable, but someone saying that made me think, well, maybe I would be more comfortable on my back, but I'm uncomfortable. Of course I'm uncomfortable. I'm giving birth.
Having a baby.
Yeah. I'm uncomfortable. So anyways, I did rotate to my back. And again, we talked about that is more for the doctor than for the person giving birth. But then pushing was coached first birth, which again, things it's beautiful.
Yes.
It was everything. It was beautiful, but there were little things here and there that you learn in your first that you adapt for your second.
And it's not often, I mean, I know for some doulas, it unfortunately is more often. For me personally, it's not often that I'm in situations where you can tell there's a power struggle. And unfortunately that did take place a little bit at your birth. And it was obviously during that moment of breaking the water, but also during pushing. I remember saying to you, just listen to your body. Your body is doing this. And any bit of motivation or conversation was not taken well by the doctor who was there. And I even remember her saying something to the nurse, annoyed that you couldn't hear them when I was talking to you. And so the voice got louder in a way of telling me to be quiet.
Yeah.
And you and I unpacked that and talked about that postpartum. And these are just hard, but conversations that we need to have, not only for healing, but also for those that come after us, right? Of there are sometimes some tough situations. And there was just really beautiful, beautiful moments that day,
Mhm.
really
Mhm.
beautiful moments. And I felt like most of those moments, it was when it was just the three of us.
Yes.
Like it just felt so calm. It just
Yeah.
felt, and I know there were moments of doubt and, oh, this is taking longer. But you had done so much work leading up to this birth that you trusted Brent and I. And
Mhm.
when we offered those suggestions or positive affirmations, like your mind really took to that. And like within an instant
Yeah.
went back to your zone because of the work you had done leading up to it. So yeah. So I'm sorry. Yeah, finish. So yeah. So the pushing stage, it was interesting.
Yeah, it was. And this is, so kind of being coached through pushing. And
Mhm,
when you're a first time mom giving birth, you don't know any different.
mhm.
And so your first experience, you learn from that a lot, which again, I'm
100%.
excited then to tell you birth
Yes.
number two and things that were different.
Yes.
Uh, but I say we,
I always say we, and I'm always like, I'm taking credit
because
for all
everyone
of
was there,
yes.
for just a little over an hour, I think
Mhm,
it was. And the parts that were, I remember the Ring of Fire. If you don't know the Ring of Fire, I'll let you look it up.
mhm.
I remember looking at you and saying, "The Ring of Fire is real."
So real.
It was like at one point I wanted to get it out, get it out, get it out, and the next point I was like, "Put it back in, put it back in, put it back in," because the Ring of Fire was like it is. It's
Intense.
a ring of fire.
Mhm.
So I remember
So much
that, and
stretching, so
yeah,
much stretching.
yeah, yeah, and pushing on my back. But the part that was hard for me was I felt like I couldn't catch my breath because my knees were up. And in between, they didn't get to go back down so I
Yes.
could get another full breath in.
Right.
So that was a little bit difficult. Brent was on one side and he wasn't necessarily like pulling so hard up on my leg to get my knee up. But the nurse was.
Mhm.
And I remember feeling like I couldn't get a full breath to really like bear down and push.
Right.
Uh, so again, I was comfortable on my side.
Mhm.
I wish I would
Mhm.
have just stayed on my side.
Mhm.
So then, yeah, the Ring of Fire came, the pushing, I and then baby was out.
Mhm.
I don't know. It just
Mhm.
you push and you push and you push, and you can feel them come out,
Mhm.
and then not,
Mhm.
and a little bit more, and then there's that relief of like, okay, they're out, and we didn't know what we were having. So then
Yes.
Brent got to tell me that it was a boy.
That
Actually, I don't
moment.
even know if he told me. I think he kind of looked and was like, and then I saw before
Yes.
he actually said it's a boy. Um, so yeah, it was, and then he was there, and
Mhm.
uh, I don't remember if he was put right on my
I
chest. I think there was a blanket on my chest, and then he was put on top of that.
mhm.
Um, and then he was there, and
Was able to
he,
stay with you.
yeah, he was able to stay
Mhm.
with me, laid there. Brent was able to cut the cord.
Mhm.
Um, birthed the placenta. I don't really remember what that felt like with my first, which
I
is
say it's
interesting.
I say it's similar to like baby's body, right? Like after the
Yeah.
head, after the shoulders,
Yeah.
the placenta feels similar to like the rest of baby's body, kind of.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. And yeah, then he was there and it was
Mhm.
wonderful.
Mhm.
And we didn't have a for sure name picked out.
Mhm. Love
And
his
I
name.
just,
I love
there
both
was
your
just,
boys' names.
thank you. There's just this sense of relief and joy and I mean, exhaustion, but just like this sense of relief, really,
Mhm.
of I did it.
I did it.
He's here.
Mhm.
Like this, I don't even know what word to describe it. I don't know if you can.
No, it's well, and we say often, right? Like birth is something that you'll never forget, but you can't quite remember.
Yeah.
But just this marathon and to cross the finish line and all of it to just process in that moment and like just take it all in. It's just there's nothing else like it.
Yeah.
There's nothing else like it. And
Yeah.
that's why a lot of birth doulas are on a mission to make that moment as beautiful as we can, because it cannot be replicated in any other scenario
No.
in life.
No.
So I think I love his story for so many reasons. I think it also is just a very real, honest, true first time mom labor, really, of like all that work you did at home, how it kind of started, how the intensity changed, like all of that is pretty like straightforward in the sense of like what a first time labor looks like realistically. And then obviously we started work when you were pregnant with your second, knowing that things could look different. And boy, did it.
Oh
So
my
I would
gosh.
love for you to share his story,
Yes.
and all the changes and differences that you experienced through that labor versus your first.
Oh man. Okay, this will be much shorter.
It's a whirlwind.
Okay, so Cyrus, my first, we look at, 24 hours of labor.
Mhm.
And you hear your second goes faster. And so I was expecting, okay, let's cut it in half. Maybe we'll get done in half the time.
Yeah.
That's what I thought in my head.
Yeah.
So uh again, you look back and you think about things a little bit more, but
Mhm.
starting at like 37 weeks, I think I was at about, they said like a 2.5 or a 3,
Mhm.
and just kept going at that for a while. So he was due May 18th.
Mhm.
And that was a Wednesday. And the Sunday prior, I was really uncomfortable. And I think that's actually where like some of my labor started, maybe. I don't even know if
Mhm.
this is real, but I felt like I was in labor for a day and then I stopped for a day.
Mhm.
So I was really uncomfortable. I was feeling really nauseous that Sunday. I was like,
I remember
just
that. Mhm.
I don't know, something was just really weird, but I felt nauseous the entire day. My in-laws brought over dinner. I couldn't eat any of it. I apologized. I was like, I'm so sorry. I'm just really nauseous today. I don't know.
Mhm.
Went to bed Sunday, fine. Monday, wonderful day.
Yeah.
I remember Brent had the day off for some reason or another, or no, he was working from home. I brought Cyrus to daycare. I came home, did a couple things. We went to lunch and we just had like a great day. We had a nice lunch date. Went and picked Cyrus up, had a nice evening. And I remember putting Cyrus to bed, and I
Mm.
just knew that this is when I might cry.
Mhm.
um,
Mhm. I think it's a very, very important part of the story to share for sure. I know.
I knew that was the last night that he was going to be my only boy, my only baby.
Mhm.
And I just spent a little extra time putting him to bed.
Mm. Mhm.
And I don't know, obviously, there was a reason why that thought came in
Mhm.
as I was putting him to bed. And I just laid there with him a little bit longer
Mhm.
and read a couple extra books and just spent some time with him because I just thought, it could be tonight. I didn't have any other signs. I wasn't having any contractions that day. I wasn't going to the bathroom like I did with him
Mhm.
with
Yeah.
when Cyrus was born. But I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't
Well,
know how to
and I
describe it.
think to back up kind of during our prenatal with your second, we talked about this
Oh yeah.
and and please correct me if I'm wrong, but it wasn't that you were worried about loving another child or how that
Mhm.
was going to work, which is a very normal feeling for some. Um, but Cyrus was a baby still, and
Mhm.
he's who made you mom. And
Yeah.
even though there was no way of, this is what I think like is so interesting is like not everything in life has to be fixed. Like I
No.
remember talking to you
Mhm.
and it was just like, let's have this conversation. And there's no words, there's no actions that fix that for a mom.
Yeah.
but let's have the conversation now. And you were just so aware of that and how that would feel and the worries that came along with that, or just the realizations, right? Of like, this is a transition and Cyrus is my baby and
Mm.
he's who made me mom. And, we grow so much in that time frame, not only as a mom, but like as an individual, as a person, right? We learn so
Yeah.
much about ourselves during motherhood. And so I just thought it was so honest. And it was such an important conversation to have because I think a lot of moms go through those feelings of whether it was similar to kind of what you were feeling, or sometimes that feeling of, I mean, I just remember when I was pregnant with the twins. And of course, looking back now, I'm like, oh my gosh, that sounds so terrible. But it was real. I was like, I know I love Mackenzie.
Mhm.
I don't know if I love these babies. And that sounds crazy to look back at now. But obviously, I was dealing with the transition of she made me mom. We had
Mhm.
3.5 years, just the two of us. Um, and I knew that the dynamics in our household, they were going to change times two. Right. And
Yeah.
so it was just like those feelings are normal. That you're an amazing mom. And the fact that you can even be thinking about those things and talking about those things just shows that. And it just took me years to realize that. And even though our experiences were different, I just remember sitting there and it's like, let's just feel this. Like
Yeah.
that's healthy to feel what we're feeling. And I just remember being so happy that you had that moment with him that night of
Yeah.
like just listening to your intuition. There was no signs of like,
No.
this is going to happen, but you just followed your intuition. Like you were just
Yeah.
present and in the moment. And
Yeah, and I wanna try to describe that feeling
Mhm,
now that I was having because it wasn't this, how am I ever gonna love someone as much as Cyrus? That was
mhm,
not what I was feeling, but it was really hard to explain that to people
right.
because I would start to tell them how I was feeling, and oftentimes I was hit with the response of, "It you just love like, it you just love them. You don't think that you can, but you just do." But I was like, "But that's not what I'm trying to explain to someone."
Mhm,
And then when we sat down together, you kind of helped me talk through what I was really thinking. And it wasn't, how am I going to love someone as much as Cyrus? It was this feeling of, I know I will love both of my babies. What I don't know how to do yet, and you won't until you do it,
mhm,
is how to share myself with both of them in what they need and knowing that might not always be equal in terms of time and affection and all of that, but I am one person now
mhm,
providing for two. What are the logistics of how is that all going to work?
mhm,
And it was never this fear of not loving one the same as the other. It was this sense of, how am I going to give them both what I know they need and deserve?
right.
And not necessarily out of fear, because I wasn't fearful of that.
Mhm,
Again, it's so hard to explain, but just, I want them to both get what they deserve out
mhm,
of their mom.
mhm,
And that's kind of a lot of pressure.
mhm.
So
Yes.
we just sat with that for a while. And you were the first person to sit there and just sit with me
Mhm,
and not really try to tell me, like, oh, it'll be fine, or oh, you'll figure it out. Like, no, these are just real feelings that are happening.
mhm.
So
Yeah.
for anyone else who's having trouble just describing that, I don't know if that would help or not, but that's how I felt.
Mhm,
And I couldn't find anyone else who
mhm.
understood that or knew what I was trying to say.
Hey guys, it's Stephanie Sinclair, founder and owner of How to Mom. I'm just interrupting today's episode to make sure you are well aware of all that How to Mom offers. We, of course, are a community and a support group for all moms at all stages of life, but we also offer a large variety of services that I wanted to make sure you are well aware of. We offer birth doula services, both in person or online support. We have birth support groups with different birth packages to choose from. We also provide placenta encapsulation services, lactation services from our lactation counselors. We also offer postpartum services, birth planning assistance, belly casting. We have a registered dietitian, nutritionist. We also offer a variety of photography services from birth, newborn, and family packages. We truly have it all here at How to Mom. So please don't hesitate to reach out today to have a free consult and help us find the best way to support you in your pregnancy, birth, and postpartum journey. Now back to today's episode. I know this is a little bit different, but I know people listening, it will touch moms who either were able to describe that feeling or maybe they never could. And so it was overlooked or kind of brushed under the rug. But a client said to me the other day, and I don't know why this conversation made me think of it. I said, is there any piece of advice you would love to leave our listeners? And she said, I want you to use your mama voice even when it shakes.
Mm. Yeah. Holy cow.
I mean, I was like, I can't even talk after that. Like, and that's what I want for all of these listeners today, right? Like, even when you didn't know how to explain it, we sat there and you just kept trying to find the words.
Yeah.
And just like you did today. And like, there's going to be somebody else listening who's going to say, oh my gosh, I've never been able to explain it. And Brigette just explained it for me.
Yeah.
And it's going to make their heart feel lighter.
Yeah.
And inspired. And so this is why we share our stories.
Yeah. Because you just need to know that, first of all, that your feelings are validated and also that you're not alone in those. Mm-hmm. And that there's someone who has made it through that feeling and those emotions. Because it was just this loss of, I don't know how to be everything to both of them at the same time.
And I love what you say, not only what they need, but what they deserve.
Yeah.
Like, and that is a lot of pressure. It's a lot of pressure as a mom. Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that part. I know it's emotional, but it's such an important part of your story.
Yeah.
That I think needed to be shared. Yeah. Okay. So tell everybody about this beautiful whirlwind of a birth. And I agree with you in the sense of, okay, let's cut this in half. Like that's aligned and made a lot of sense. And so we talked about like timing of contractions and how that looks different for a second time mom.
Yep. And we talked a lot about that and preparing. And so in my head, I was thinking, okay, it's kind of, that 5-1-1 rule for the second one, 5 minutes apart, lasting about a minute. I don't even know what the other one is for.
For an hour.
Okay.
And all that obviously will depend on like where you guys are at in relation to where you're birthing. And obviously your comfort level. And I just, again, when you work with a doula, they really get to know you and kind of like, what are your desires? And knowing that a big part of Cyrus's success story was all the work that you did at home. And so that contributed to kind of what our plan was essentially for the second birth.
Yeah. Yep. So we thought, labor at home and you had mentioned until you felt like you wanted some other comfort measure. And I was like, okay, cool. Let's go with that. And I should say that preparing for this one, I prepared a little bit differently. Still did a lot of the correct positions to get him in the right position. Was still pretty active. My pregnancy with him was really hard. It was it was a really difficult pregnancy. I had COVID twice during this pregnancy.
And pretty tough symptoms, right?
I had, one time I went to labor and delivery because my legs cramped so bad and my low back. I was at work and the school nurse was like, you need to go. Yeah. Now my sister left work, who works at a school near me, and drove me. So just a whirlwind. I had influenza one time. Gosh, I don't even know. I felt like it was just things on top of another.
Yeah, it was a
tough pregnancy. And then now preparing. So what I had learned from my first was, and how I prepared for my second was, I knew now and I'm a pretty logical person.
Mhm.
I like to know the biological, physiological part of birth and trusting my body. And going through it once, I could trust it even more. But the logical part that really got me through my second was contractions never last longer than a minute.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
I knew I can do anything for a minute.
Mhm.
And most of the time, by the time you feel your contraction, you're already like 15 seconds into it,
Right.
if not more.
Mhm.
So I felt like after my first, I needed a little bit more of the logical preparation
Mhm.
so that I knew in my brain that I could get through it.
Mhm.
So that's kind of the only way I really prepared differently was the logical part. Like I
Yeah,
knew I could do it.
absolutely.
And so to the birth, put Cyrus to bed, went to bed again, had no inclination, woke up 1 o'clock ish, 1 o'clock ish, and had a cramp, contraction, right away, you don't really know.
Yeah.
So drank some water, went to the bathroom. I just had to pee again.
Mhm.
No other sign from my first of like the pressure and having to poop
Yep.
a lot before. Nope, none of that. Got back in bed and was like, Miss, I think I'm having a contraction. I think these are contractions, not cramps.
Yep.
So I laid there for about a half an hour and it was like, yep, they're consistent.
Yeah.
And I can't even remember if I tracked him on my phone.
I
I
don't
don't think
think
I
so.
did.
Mm-mm. I
I
don't
don't think
think
I
so.
did because I think I just knew.
Mhm.
And so I I didn't even wake my husband up. I just went in the living room because again I thought, all right, we're in this. Let's
Yep. Do some
labor at home
laboring.
for a while. Went out to the living room and again a logical part goes stay upright.
Mhm.
Stay upright, create the pressure to open up your cervix.
Mhm.
Like let's not lay down. So again, you learn from your first. I'm
Use
like,
gravity.
yep,
Yep.
let gravity do the work, stay upright. So labored upright on my hands and knees, kind of on the side of the couch, leaning on the couch with my knees on the floor. I did a lot of that. And then I think I did that for about 2 hours because I think it was around
Mhm.
3:30. What was it? I don't remember when I text you this time.
I think it was about that because you had said, I've
Okay.
been laboring for a little while.
Okay.
Mhm.
And they were growing more intense, but still very manageable.
Mhm.
Breathing through them, I would count backwards from 30.
Mm.
Every time I had a contraction, I'd go 30, 29,
I love that.
28, 27. Because again, I knew I was
Logically.
15
Mhm.
seconds in at least
Mhm.
by the time I could feel it. And that
Mhm.
logical part, I swear, was what made a difference.
Well, because even when you get to 0, I mean, even if it's still hanging on, it's coming way
Yes, it's
down.
coming down.
Yeah.
Yep.
I love that.
So that's kind of what I was using. And I didn't read that anywhere. I just kind of
Yeah.
thought about it. And I think it was 3:15, 3:30. I opened the door and told my husband, I think we need to go.
Mhm.
And he didn't like jump out of bed
Mhm.
because again, he's watched me, probably knew like, yeah, right.
Yeah.
And
Well, and just the experience with Cyrus, like all of that kind
yeah,
of contributing. Mhm.
yeah. So then I text my in-laws because they were on call to come watch Cyrus. And I just text them because again, you don't really know. And then 15 minutes later, I walked back in the bedroom and I was like, you need to call your parents.
We gotta
We
go.
need to get this show on the road.
Yeah. Oh my
So he
god.
called them. They got there here in about 25 minutes, I think.
Yeah.
And they came in and I quickly went and snapped a final picture before
Mhm.
uh
I
just a
love that.
mirror selfie. And then when they came in, I was laboring again against the wall on the couch and I think this was about 4:10
Mhm.
maybe.
Mhm.
And Brent was getting things in the car and his mom kind of looked at him and was like,
You gotta go.
You got to go.
Yeah.
Like, you got to go.
Yeah.
And I am breathing through contractions, and his mom is in the living room watching me do this. And she told me later, she goes, I knew you were almost there. Having gone through 3 of her own
Yes.
births with her own kids, she was like, I knew you were almost there.
Oh my goodness. She's like,
And
no tea today, Brent.
yeah, yeah, no, you don't have time for that. So she must have told his dad, like, get Brent in the car.
Mm-hmm.
And his dad told him, go grab a couple towels. Like,
Mm-hmm.
grab a couple towels. And his mom, and again, I'm just breathing through things, kind of in my own world, hearing this, but kind of like, I still have a long ways to go. Like,
Yeah.
I've only been in labor for a couple hours.
Yeah.
And make my way out to the truck,
Oops.
kind of labor on the side of the truck.
Yeah.
Because it was, I mean, they were consistent. This was every 3 minutes.
Right.
And
intense.
intense. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And his mom, I think on the way out, or his dad, I can't remember which one, said, you can call for an escort. Like, you can call the police, they'll escort you there. And I was thinking, you guys are,
Yeah.
I'm fine.
Yeah.
But again, them having gone through a few were like, well,
yeah,
ready.
We're seeing some signs.
Yeah. Get in the car. I remember taking a picture when we got in the car because I wanted to know what time it was.
Okay.
And I just took a picture of the road randomly. So I had a timestamp on my phone, and it was 4:17.
Okay.
Was when we left. And we're driving. I don't remember a whole lot. I remember feeling a little bit nauseous. So I grabbed one of the towels in case I was going to throw up.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember a song coming on my husband's playlist. I think it was Cotton Eye Joe. I don't remember.
I remember you telling me this at the hospital.
Yeah. And all I remember from basically the whole car ride was telling him, change the song. I think that was the only thing that came out of my mouth. And I said at one point, I want to get in the bath right away.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I think those were the only 2 things I said on my way there. And then we get there, and I didn't even know, like, you can leave your car parked at the emergency room door.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I didn't know that. So I get out, have a contraction at the truck. Brent goes, parks the car. I make my way in, have a few contractions on the way up to labor and delivery. And
did you take the stairs?
No.
The elevator. Okay.
Yeah, I took the elevator, which maybe I should have taken the stairs, because when I got in there, I was thinking, what if this shut off?
Yeah. Oh, geez. Yeah. By yourself in the elevator.
Yeah. And by the time I actually got up to labor and delivery, Brent had gotten there. Like,
okay.
He was quick. And we got in triage, and the nurse came in, and she's like, okay, we're going to do a cervical check. And that's where they, do your COVID test and all that stuff. And she's like, okay, is it okay if I do your check now? And I was like, just a minute, because I was having a contraction.
Mm-hmm.
And then she did. And she's like, you're at a 9. And I was like,
what?
And for a second I thought, did I just hear you right?
Yes.
She's like, yeah, so you're at a 9. There's a bulging bag. So, like, my water didn't break with my second one either. And she basically said, we can break your water if you'd like, and baby will be here very, very soon.
Mm-hmm.
And Brent, I think, had texted you or called you and said, she's at a 9.
Yep.
And I said to the nurse, I want my doula to be here. She's on the way.
Mm-hmm.
So then
I think I was already on my way, because I knew you guys were going. So I was on my way.
Oh yeah, forgot that.
But he did text me, and I was still like St. Paul. And that's when he said she's at a 9. And I was so thankful that it wasn't rush hour. There was hardly anybody on the road. And I was like, I am coming.
I'm gonna be there.
I am coming as fast as I can. And I was just, yeah.
And again, our partners do things to help us feel calm, because he told me that you were 5 minutes away.
Close.
You were not 5 minutes away. And he knew that.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
then the nurse is like, well, would you like to try to walk to your room? And I was like, no,
Not happening.
wheel me in there.
Yes.
So I stayed on the bed. They wheeled me in. Again, it was intense. Like this
Very.
was coming. This was happening. And I remember doing the horsey lips that you taught me during my first to help me relax. So I was just breathing through those. And I remember telling my midwife, because I had worked with a midwife this time,
Yes.
that you were coming and I wanted to wait till you were there. And she just sat by my side. She was wonderful. And then again, I'm running through the logical parts in my head. And I was like, okay, if my doula is really 5 minutes away, I know it's going to take a second for them to get ready to break my water. I know that even if they break my water, it might take a little bit before it starts pushing. So I just said, okay, can we just break my water? Because I knew by the time everything was in action and all this, you'd be there. So they did, you had gotten there, I think right before.
Right before.
Okay. It was,
I don't think I parked my car. I'm pretty sure I left my car.
That's amazing. And it was a weird experience because when they rolled me in and I had like gotten onto the right bed, it was almost like chaos in the room. I didn't feel chaos in the room, but it was so much movement and so many people in and out because the room wasn't ready. And when they heard that I was at a 9, it was like, okay, we got to like get everything set up. So there were a lot of people in and out. I didn't feel overwhelmed. I didn't really feel that. I was aware of it, but didn't feel any stress of it, which was good. And then you had gotten there, they broke my water, and I don't remember how long it was before I started pushing, but it was.
Do you remember what position you were in when I entered the room?
I think I was on my side.
You were on your side.
Yeah. Which again, I'm like, this is your body does what it needs to do. So I was on my side when they broke my water too.
Yep.
And this is when, again, I felt like I had to have some logic because that's just the person I am. But she broke my water and I remember her saying, we have Mick. And I knew what that meant. And I think a lot of people maybe wouldn't know, but I knew that it meant that there was meconium. So baby had pooped and we knew we were having a boy this time. So baby had pooped. And when I was born, had done that. And my mom didn't get to see me because I had swallowed it and ingested it and whatnot. And so at that point, there was just this moment of fear where an urgency almost. I felt like the faster I could get him out, the less likely he was to get that into his lungs. So I said she explained to me, which again was great working with her. She had said, there's going to be more people in the room. There are going to be some, the NICU will be in here. And I just kind of looked at you and I think you had said, it's just a precaution or something like that. And I said, if he needs to leave, I want Brent to go with him.
I remember that like it was yesterday.
I didn't want, I wanted one of us to be with him. If anything were to happen, and I just remember saying that and you saying, yep. And maybe that's also when my midwife said, they're just here as a precaution. Like, we're not going to take him away if we don't need to, and Brent can go with and whatnot. So then it was almost for me, this sense of urgency of like, okay, let's get him out because he's less likely then to ingest it. And I don't remember exactly how things progressed, but you
just started pushing.
Yeah, you got the urge. And that was, again, my body just did it, which is so cool. So cool. And there's no way to explain it. It just starts to do that. And we can be open and completely honest here. I because I didn't use the bathroom prior,
Mhm.
it all came out
Mhm.
like
As it does.
fast and
Mhm.
furious.
Mhm.
And sorry to those who don't want to hear that, but
No, it's a part of
it,
it.
it, it all just came out.
Mhm.
And I remember thinking, like, I'm so sorry, you guys, but also thinking,
I have no
it's just,
control. It's
yeah,
just
we're just
happening.
all, it's just
It's
happening.
just happening.
And so, yeah, I pushed on my side
Mhm.
and I don't, I didn't remember how many pushes it took. I had to ask you, and I think you said it was four
Mhm.
through four contractions.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, and there he was.
When I
He
just remembered too, I mean, there was no interference in terms of the midwife asking
no.
for a different position. Everybody was just meeting you where you were at. And I just remember kneeling down and being able to see you kind of through the guardrail
Mhm.
and just being able to see your eyes. And we just focused and we were breathing. And yeah, it was just, there was no interference. It was just like, your body's doing this.
Yeah,
Yeah.
which is so wild because I heard that many, many times about labor, but
Mhm.
I didn't believe it.
Mhm.
And then you
Mhm.
do it and
Mhm.
you tell that story, and there's going to be so many people who hear it and go, yeah, right, that's not real. And then, but it is, really
Mhm.
is.
And so tell our listeners, what time was he born?
Okay, so 5:41.
Yes.
So we left our house around 4:15, and
Mhm.
it takes about 30 minutes to get to the hospital. So I'm like, we probably got to the hospital 4:45,
Mhm.
and he was born at 5:41.
Mhm. 1 hour. And that was through triage. That was through
Yeah.
getting up to labor and delivery,
Yeah.
getting into your room. It was, yeah, it was a whirlwind.
Yeah.
And I think, we had talked about obviously it going faster. I don't think any of us expected that. I mean, to wake
No.
up to some cramps at 1 a.m.,
Hmm.
unsure, is this are these contractions? Is this labor? And then to have your baby. And let's tell the listeners what happened with the meconium.
Um, he got to stay with.
Mhm.
They put him right on my chest.
Mhm.
Um, with both the boys, I sing them happy birthday
Yes,
when
you
they were
did.
born.
Yes.
And they suctioned a lot of it out as
Mhm.
best they could. He didn't need to get taken away. Well, actually, wait, let me think about this for a second.
I think they first suctioned on your chest. I think it was
Yeah.
after a little bit of time, they brought him over to
Okay.
the warmer just to do and they if I remember right, and tell me, they were extremely respectful. They
Mhm.
walked you through everything and
Yes.
asked you. They did not take your baby
No.
until you were like, yes, yeah, why don't you go check him out over there just to make
Yeah.
sure? Um,
Yeah. Because Brent cut the cord
mhm,
again, and I birthed the placenta, I think,
mhm.
before they took him.
Before, bef-
Yeah. Okay.
yeah, yeah. And I think, again, like Bridget mentioned, like NICU's in there as a precaution to make sure aspirating doesn't occur. What should always be happening if baby looks good, baby's crying, baby should be able to go right on mom's chest. That team can then come around mom, listen,
Hmm.
suction if need be. It's only if they have to, if there was aspirating that occurs, where they would do that in the warmer, or if there's, future interventions that need to take place. But um, they knew Bridget's wishes, and they knew that if baby was okay, that she wanted him right on her chest. And I think it was kind of after you had some of that skin to skin time, then they brought baby to warmer, and Brent still was able to go over with baby
Yeah.
just so we could get you kind of settled and situated and a little bit more comfortable.
Yeah.
And then he was able to come right back.
Yeah.
You. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
So fast.
two very amazing, beautiful, mother led birth stories,
Mhm.
but also very, very different.
Mhm.
And it was just an absolute joy and honor to be there for both. I am so grateful that I was able to get there before Banks was actually born.
Yes. Yes.
Um, and I also got a happy birthday
Yeah.
song from Brigette in that moment to both of us. And like I said, it was the best birthday present um, ever. And it was such a great way to start the year. I hope all of you listeners enjoyed those stories. I know that I learned something from every single birth that I witness and support. And I really think there's a ton of takeaways from today. And I think Brigette already gave so many amazing tips and advice. But if you could leave our listeners with one thing today regarding birth, pregnancy, motherhood, it's a loaded question because I know you're filled with a lot of inspiring advice. But what would you like to leave our listeners with today?
I guess I feel like my motherhood motto is that everything is temporary.
Mm,
And if we can approach that in times of like joy, it helps us to be present in that moment and just sit with it and experience that joy. And knowing that everything is temporary in those difficult moments, also repeating that when you're struggling gives you the reminder like, this is temporary.
mm,
There is a point where this is going to stop or this is going to end. And that has just been my motherhood motto is everything is temporary. The positive, the negative, and
I love that.
birth too. I mean, everything is temporary. Those contractions are temporary. The
Mm,
pain is temporary. The first moment of having that baby on you is temporary.
mm,
And postpartum too, because we could do a whole nother podcast about the difference postpartum between the two.
I think we should.
But
I think we should.
I think we should. Oh, yeah.
Yes.
But I would just say that having that and repeating that to yourself every day, which is what I do, helps so much in both aspects of those moments. And when
Mhm,
you repeat it over and over and over again, you can catch yourself in that moment of the tantrum of a 2-year-old
mhm.
or watching them splash in a puddle that you didn't really want them to go in, but knowing like that's so much joy for them.
The
Let's
joy.
just let's just see this moment as being temporary and know that, you know what, we'll go in and we'll clean it up later.
Absolutely. I love that. Well, I want to thank all our listeners for being here today and listening to these beautiful birth stories. I want to thank Brigette again for being vulnerable and raw and real and sharing because I do believe it's going to inspire so many and make a huge difference. So thank you all for listening. I hope you have a wonderful day and we will catch you on the next episode. All right, you guys, that is it for today's episode. I hope you enjoyed. If so, please subscribe to our podcast, comment, share, give us feedback. We'd love to hear from you. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to listen, and we will see you next time.